So good morning. We're already at the limits of my Michif. I'm not very good yet. I'm learning. My name is Kristen Desjardins de Klerk. Welcome. And we are so pleased to have you here this morning. I'd like to acknowledge that when I am a visitor here, I'm Métis from Red River Métis from Treaty 1 and a citizen of the Manitoba Métis Federation. I acknowledge, thank you. I acknowledge that this land, Tiohtià:ke, or also known as Montreal, is the traditional and unceded territory of the Kanakehá, sorry if that's wrong, nation. I recognize their historic and ongoing connection to these waters and to these lands and their long relationship with these lands. And as we sit here today and hear this wonderful presentation, workshop style, I want and challenge you to think about your relationship to this land. I am an uninvited guest today, which is always a strange and unusual way to think about my relationship to land and what that means. Still, I'm glad to be welcomed so warmly, despite being uninvited. So I'm going to pass the mic over to these wonderful speakers in just a second. Our presentation today that we're hearing is called the Empathy Project, using simulation as an advocacy tool. And our presenters are both from Alliance to End Homelessness Ottawa, Katie Burkholder-Harris, the Executive Director, and Sophia Kelly-Langer, the Education and Training Manager.
Thank you so much, Kristen. And it's actually just following on your land acknowledgement. We're from Ottawa, which is also unceded land. And I think that's something that we often feel weird doing land acknowledgements because there's this moment of like, thank you. I'm like, we weren't invited. And a lot of our work is about, helping free land to be used for housing in order to scale up non-market housing in particular. And again, there's such an important conversation there and important work in working with our Indigenous partners in particular of what does it even mean to be free land. So anyways, I just really appreciate you speaking to that. And that's something that we try and keep front of mind certainly in our work. So somebody has a clicker. Sophia, you have a clicker? Okay, you've got the power. So yeah, we're on the floor because I felt strange at a podium, to be perfectly honest. But today's a workshop, so we're more excited to be able to have time to dialogue, to engage. We're going to make you talk, and we're probably going to have a few of you volunteer. So if you feel like being a volunteer, I've already voluntold a few people, but if you're like a willing participant, please let us know. But really, we're going to be talking about an initiative we have called the Empathy Project. I'll give you a bit of the history. This is basically our key mobilization tool at the Alliance to End Homelessness in Ottawa. And we're going to do, or attempt to do, a condensed version, so you get a bit of a sense of what the work actually looks like. And then we're going to show a bit of the emerging data in terms of its impact and want to have a conversation with you about how you could leverage this kind of a tool in your own community. So a little bit about us, yeah? So this is our job. We want to see Ottawa as a city that is mobilized to end homelessness. And I mean that seriously. We're not talking about like, we want to end homelessness. And we really mean it. We really, really want to see an end to homelessness in our community. We are starting to see reductions, especially around diversion and helping people stay housed. And that is our work as the Ottawa Alliance. Next slide. We represent 75 agencies who are all in the housing and homelessness sector in Ottawa. We've been an advocacy organization since like the 80s, but are increasingly moving into a role of like citywide mobilization as well as systems planning and coordination work of the sector. Next slide. So this is my little Venn diagram of the many stakeholders that we have to navigate, and the Alliance in particular, and who we're trying to strategically engage in order to make change happen. Certainly the political side of things and the bureaucratic side, and I know we've got politicians and bureaucrats here and many community partners who are trying to balance that relationship with both. But that's a lot of our work, is navigating those relationships, wanting to work closely and bring along city staff staff in particular, as well as City Council. And our focus is predominantly local, but we also work provincially and federally, mostly because we're in Ottawa. And then the other piece of that too, in terms of stakeholder pressure. So how can we get the public, yes, but also agencies, yes, but also the Chamber of Commerce? How do we get the Board of Trade? How do we get Ottawa Tourism? These groups in Ottawa that have power, how do we get them on board with actually ending homelessness? And so this has become a tool that we've used for that work. But in that space is change, and I have to say, we are starting to see it. And when you hear unusual suspects like the Board of Trade start to say the same things you've been saying, it's a real good feeling. And when they say it in front of a bunch of developers, really good feeling. So that's the work that we're trying to do right now. And I'm going to turn it over to Sophia, and she's going to explain how this thing works.
Thank you so much, Katie. Unlike Katie, walking around with a microphone does not feel intuitive to me. So you're going to all watch me get like less jittery and nervous in real time. Watch it happen. Okay, so we can't really talk about the Empathy Project without talking about the value of lived experience. So for those of you that were in our session yesterday, this is going to be a lot of repeat, but bear with me. So about 5 years ago, the Alliance had some pretty significant changes in structures and staffing, and that wasn't just at the leadership level, it was also in terms of building entire new staff teams to do entire new bits of work that had never been done before. There was a recognition that, as we all know, this work is done best when it's grounded in lived experience and the wisdom of people with lived and living experience. But there wasn't a whole lot established at the time as to how you do that. I think still today we all have this kind of vague awareness that it's what we're supposed to be doing, but it's the like, okay, how? What's next? We use this slide because there's an analogy my colleague Moira loves to use, which is, I personally don't drive. Had the privilege of living downtown for a very long time. I never had to, right? But technically speaking, tomorrow I could go to school and I could learn to be a mechanic. That is something I am capable of doing. I might not be a very good one, never driven a car, but I could learn it in a functional way. I could learn the details of the car itself. I might be able to take it apart. I might be able to label all of the parts that I removed. I might be able to put it back together again. But if you asked me what it felt like to drive the car, I'm not really sure, right? And what we're doing when we talk about systems planning, system design, but even education on housing and homelessness is we're talking about building a car without driving it, unless we're engaging our lived experts. So we also acknowledge that this is there's like a legal framework to this, right? We talk about housing as a human right quite a bit, but that is also not theoretical. That's something that has been enshrined in law. So people with lived experience of homelessness are by definition rights holders. They are people who have not had their rights upheld. And there are established approaches for working within a human rights-based approach to this issue. And for those to happen, as you can see, you need to engage the rights holders in all stages of policy development. And we kind of look at our policy cycle, and there's some pieces where that looks a little easier, right? There's those pieces around program design and evaluation is often where it's like really intuitive. We know that it's a good idea to talk to our people at those checkpoints. But what about all the other checkpoints, right? What about when we're doing our very earliest stages of education, when we're building up from concepts? What about those end pieces when we're evaluating policy itself, right? Those are the areas where we realize that the Alliance would not be true to a rights-based approach unless we found a way to really ethically and consistently engage people with lived experience of homelessness. So we did. 5 years ago, almost, we put together a team that we call the Expert Steering Team. This immediately moved the Alliance from 3 staff up to a 12-person team, of which 8 are people with lived experience of homelessness. Every member of the EST is a permanent staff member. Everyone has their titles and their emails, and they are part of this. And while the EST's work is extremely varied now and always, particularly as it relates to government relations, the EST has done wonderful work in Ottawa, integrating into existing structures and building new ones, including partnerships with the city. We have had a tremendous amount of success, but The team identified very, very early on that they weren't going to get very far unless we started tackling the issue of how people understand homelessness. Much of what we're going to talk about today is this concept that it's very difficult to fully commit to an issue that you don't feel. And we have an awful lot of people in the public who hear us, they're hearing our messages, they're hearing our platforms, they're not feeling it. Homelessness is too distant, it's much, much, much too foreign. So to get to a place where people are able to feel the insights of our expert steering team, that kind of posed a challenge for us. And what we decided to do with that was to develop the project we're talking about today, the Empathy Project. So we were aware of other educational programs related to the same issue. Some of them I'm sure you're familiar with. There are other simulation exercises to do with other areas of social policy, some of which are incredibly successful. But there are a few really common traps, and it tends to be where these projects, despite all their merits, often go off track. So there's an overly academic approach. That's a big trapping, right? And that's how we get those people that aren't having that gut reaction to the materials. We use a lot of very sterile language. Who was in the keynote? Did everybody catch it? With Loretta? So that was brilliant. And when I heard her language around the use of the term unhoused, I thought, oh, that's that. That's that. We're sterilizing things. And that sets us back. But at the same time, what's our alternative, right? Or how are we going to channel the wisdom of our lived experts without exploiting them? Or without putting someone's worst days on display in a very, very public manner, right? And what do the power dynamics look like for me to stand in front of someone and say, please tear open that wound so that I can learn from you? Oh my God, like we're really centering ourselves in that conversation. We also noticed that there were some really serious issues with system level thinking at all. Like we often will run this in spaces where people afterwards will tell us that they didn't realize they were part of the system. We say the word system as if it like means something really clear. No, it doesn't. The people outside this building think we're talking about like shelter staff. That is what they think we're talking about. They don't realize the broad depths that it extends to. So when we go to the bureaucracy, when we go to people who are working in medicine, and for the first time, they're starting to think of this as a broad systems level perspective, that's meaningful. That changes things. But it's hard to do. And lastly, humans do need to connect with human topics on human levels. Again, it's that difference between the gut response and the brain response. And manufacturing the conditions that allow someone to have a really genuine and human reaction to something is incredibly difficult. Often attempts can come across as being overly designed, too finicky for you to really engage with, or quite the opposite. They can feel like we're trying to mine the trauma of the participants. We think we worked around these, and we're going to make that case. So, picture a typical empathy project. We're going to get a little bit into demographics that we've worked with in the past, if you bear with us. But we put them through a process that lasts a half day. It's a half-day exercise. Excuse me, I am dehydrated. It's a half-day exercise where participants come to us. We have a robust team that we have built of our own staff members, critically including the EST. So when the EST saw these themes that were emerging, saw that there were barriers to the work that they wanted to do, they came up with the concept of the Empathy Project based on the model of case studies. So if you are a participant coming in here, you are not seeing any individual's real story. That is not part of this process at all. What you are seeing are fictional but realistic perspectives on system navigation. And what this does is it takes the focus off of an individual's trauma and it puts it back on the system. So you have a whole room full of our lived experts saying, this is what I'm seeing. I am seeing women losing their children. I am seeing people who are having settlement barriers. I am seeing our queer kids really suffering. And this is what it might look like. Those pieces are representative of a broad theme. The pieces that are very real are the system elements, the parts where you're stuck going through a SPDAT at shelter admission, the parts where Service Ontario asks you for $30 for your new birth certificate, right? Those pieces are the pieces that are really, really familiar and really, really real. So if you walk into an empathy project, we're going to meet you, and we have one of 8 case studies available. It's a very broad range. We're going to focus on one here today, just due to the limitations of the space and time. We don't have 3-4 hours with you. And you're going to get to know the persona whose footsteps you are walking in. Now, it's really critical to set the tone that this is not a game. So you cannot win the empathy project. There is no way to change the outcome because there isn't an outcome. You don't resolve the process of a human being's life trajectory, right? So you will meet your case study at a moment in their life and you will walk with them through the process of attempting to access services. We have 14 spaces built out in the simulation. They are physical spaces. But we don't get there yet. First we sit them down and we tell them, like I'm telling you, that we are taking a bit of a leap of faith. The empathy project is intentionally structured so that you don't get a whole lot of context ahead of time. We almost don't want people overly planning. What we find is that people who are not super familiar with the system do think that you can gamify it even if it's not a game, you know? There's that little bit of like, okay, well, let's strategize. How are we going to do income support? And they're going to have a bit of a rude awakening. We also let them know that it's an independent exercise. For you, it won't be. Again, this is a different application of some of the themes. We're going to ask you to talk to each other in a minute. But for them, we make it really clear, you don't get assigned an identical person to experience homelessness with. You don't get to brainstorm solutions with a buddy who has all the same demographics, same income, same background, same dependents. That's not reality. So we ask them to pursue it on their own in this orientation. Orientation only takes 15 minutes. It's very, very, very quick. We're talking to them the same way I'm talking to you, and then they're on their own. And they go into an hour and a half in the simulation. No one story is the same, but there are often themes. So almost every profile will deal with income support. As I'm sure we know, that's a really major theme. Almost every profile will deal with something related to their accommodations. So we'll see renters' rights situations, emergency shelter situations, social housing applications, things of those nature. And also they wait in lines. They wait a lot. In fact, we engineer lines. If they aren't being slow enough, we'll slow them down. We want people to understand that the access to services isn't instant, it isn't easy, there is frustration to it. They will wait. We will give you a stack of paperwork to take with you. And over the course of an hour and a half, you watch them feel it more and more. It becomes more and more real. And people start they will, obviously, no one could ever fully understand the experience of being there yourself, but you do start seeing a mirrored emotional reaction. You start to see that empathy actually forming in real time. People do get emotional. I had one run through where we had a man in his 40s who was trying to follow in the footsteps of a 25-year-old single mom in inadequate social housing. And he just kept trying, and we're running through the script over and over. He's trying the same thing over and over. And he just stopped and took this deep breath and went, I just want to do better for her. And couldn't let it go in that moment. It was after 4 or 5 stops, however many volunteers he had spoken to, that was the moment where he just, stop, what can we do for this person? So we go through it for an hour and a half. We visit 14 stations. You're going to see 3 today in a bit of a different way. And then we bring them in for a debrief, and the debrief is almost as long as the simulation itself. We take them in for a full hour, and that's where the magic happens. And I think this is a really critical element of this process. And if you're interested in using any aspect of simulation in your work, this is where I would really want you to put the meat of it. Without it, this is an experience, and I'm sure it would generate empathy, but then where does that go? Are we just leaving people feeling hopeless? Is it like they'll walk away and tell people that they think they get homelessness a little bit better? Or are we using it as that tool to mobilize? Where in that debrief, we're making them name the structures that they have encountered. I have had students that have absolutely no awareness of anything going on outside the door, people who have no proximity to housing and homelessness, that start talking about some of the solutions we've been talking about in this conference intuitively, because they're finally exploring it from that really broad place of being a person moving through structures. Very person in place. We put them through it for an hour. And then when they exit, we stay in touch. We give them ways to stay engaged with the movement. We give them ways to stay in touch to evaluate. And critically, we come back. Increasingly, we're doing repeat visits. And we're looking at doing an evaluation for students who have done this and gone on to graduate so they can really get an idea of those impacts. Is there anything else on preamble that I'm missing? I covered a lot of ground. Okay, what have we got next?
And it's not. It's a 90-minute session, so we're really being thorough with you. So just to let you know.
We found out on Thursday last week. Just so you can all feel adequately bad for me. So here's what we're going to do today. We can't do all that. You're not going to physically travel around. We don't have 30 volunteers with us. So we're going to abridge it a little bit. You're all at round tables right now. And I don't see any that are too small, do we?
You're forcing everyone to come in earlier to the front.
Yeah, no, I think you're good right where you are. So look around your table. These are your friends for the next hour of your life. You'll have a chance to say hello and get to know each other in a second. What we're going to do in just a second is we're going to read off a case study, but there will be a QR code on that screen. If you would like, all of the materials that we're working with are available. It's like a Google site page. You can pull it up on your phone and read along. And it's kind of handy because you can jump around. So if we're like way into a discussion and you're like, oh God, how much does this guy make a month again? You can click back. So if maybe one person at each table would like to have that handy, I'd recommend it. So we're going to look at that case study. We're going to give you prompts for discussion. We want you to start wrestling with some of the same questions that participants might be wrestling with. It's a little bit like putting the debrief cart before the horse, where often we would talk out these themes together at the end. We're going to ask you to do it as a group. We're then going to have someone come up and do the actual process someone would do at a station in the simulation with us, with me. I drew the short straw. I got to talk more. One volunteer per step. We're going to go through 3 steps together, but you will be discussing it at your groups. Don't worry about the volunteers yet. We'll deal with that later, but maybe consider if you'd like to be one. We're going to repeat that 3 times for 3 steps. Discussion, volunteer comes up, and we're going to follow our persona through his journey through 3 services. When that comes to an end, bear with us. We have more words for you. Do we have any questions about process before I switch to the case study? I'm looking. Aha! Do you want a mic?
Yeah, sorry, it's only a suggestion because I see some people with headphones. If you want to do a table with French speaking or with fluent in 2 languages, maybe that would be great.
That is a fantastic idea. And I'll repeat it for anyone that didn't hear, but I evidently didn't think about how this would work with translation software. That's my bad. Can we dedicate a table for French speakers? Okay. Maybe 2 tables.
Yeah, so over there.
Could French speakers self-organize in these 2 tables? I do apologize. It should be, because of the way that the prompts are set up, it should be easy to hit translate. Like, you should be able to see it in French. Yeah, good point. Yeah. All right. Welcome to the Empathy Project and French Early Learning class.
Also, we should say it is actually fully translated into French, like the whole project, because we do it for University of Ottawa. So that's not today's, but if you're interested in a French version, we do have one.
This is run in both languages. This is true. We do travel it, which we'll get more to later, but this is a project that could be so easily applied to any municipality, so it's really important to run in both languages, except for today, because that was an oversight. Okay, so if we're all split up, do we have any other questions on process, or do we feel good? Okay, I'm going to move ahead, but while you're discussing, we'll be rotating, so you can flag us, okay? Okay, perfect. So let's get to know our persona of the day. This is 1 of 8 randomly selected for you. If you would like to scan, and I do recommend at least one person at the table does, here you go. It'll pull up the profile. I'll read it out for you in just a second once it looks like folks have had a chance to scan. Okay, we're going to come back together, and I'm going to do my absolute best to sum it up, and then we're going to get into the first step on our persona's journey through this. So we're working today with Amaruk. So as you may know, we're from the city of Ottawa. There's a very large population of people coming down from the north, often for access to medical care, who end up kind of stuck because the social safety net does not pick them up very well upon arrival. So Amaruk is 38. This is an adult. He's a single parent. There's no other co-parent involved in his life. He's not sharing custody. He's not claiming child support. Him and his kid. He is working, but he's working those construction jobs that kind of mean you're lining up in the morning for work. There's not much of a paper trail to it. And really, he's been kind of surviving on about $1,400 max a month since he got here. He is currently homeless following an eviction. He did graduate high school. He does have his birth certificate, and he actually got an Ontario photo ID card when he came in. So he has a little bit of identification. And we give you a little bit of his story. So he came down from his northern community, and he had heard so much talk of opportunity, right? Everything is so much cheaper, and it's going to be so much easier if you can just get down there. His mother's getting older. She's maybe having some medical needs. It's important for him to relocate his family. So he comes on down with his son and his mother, and he settles in the city of Ottawa. He managed to find some informal work. He likes that. It's his preference to try to work for himself. He doesn't really want to feel like he's reliant on the system. He's never filed his taxes. He's not receiving child tax benefits. It's just not something that's really been on his radar. He kind of works with his hands. And he's never really asked for help in any formal way before, either in Nunavut or in Ontario. He did get an affordable apartment upon arrival, but it was eating up more than 70% of his income on rent. That's not including utilities. There's really very little left over for him to live off of. They weren't having much luck saving, putting down roots. And they weren't really fitting in socially either. They've been feeling a little bit isolated. Things are very, very different here. It's been increasingly taxing on him, on his son, on his mother. To make matters worse, building just sold, right? There's new owners. They want to make the place super fancy schmancy. I'm sure this is a big deal in a lot of our communities. And he was told that he would have to leave. He and his family end up moving into the shelter, and he doesn't know where to start. He's got to do something. So let's go to where his first step would likely be. Can I broadly ask, maybe somebody can shout it out, but what is your first step usually if you can't afford to live?
Don't tell them she's a plant. I'm not, though, but I would tell you what I would do. First thing I would do is go to social assistance for me and my family to try to get some income. And then because I'm taking care of someone elderly, I would go to CPP and stuff like that and see what funds I could get for them.
So she is a plant, but I saw a lot of you nodding. She beat you to it. I didn't see any other hands. I'm sorry. Okay, so Amaruk is going to go to Ontario Works. So for folks who are not in the province of Ontario, that is our income support program. That is social assistance. It's also a very restrictive one on a national scale. It's a work to receive model or something along those lines, where you have to be actively seeking employment. So he has never accessed support before, but this is step one, and there are caseworkers. He's going to arrive and talk to a person. One of you as a volunteer is going to come up and talk to that person. I'm going to be social assistance. You're going to be Amaruk. We'll get to that after. First, I want you guys to talk it out a little bit. So you're in this person's footsteps. This is day one. This is step one. Talk about what that might be like. We have some prompts for discussion for you. They're also on your phone if you need a reference. I'll have it up there as well. But we're thinking about what he might be feeling, right? Like, is this a really hopeful moment, or is he incredibly nervous? Is he maybe even a little bit ashamed, right? Some people have a really hard time taking that step. Maybe it feels a little bit like charity. Are there cultural implications? Are there language implications that we're not thinking about? What requirements might they have of him? And I'm really curious for people who are not from Ontario. Maybe speculate on that. We'll see how true that proves later on. Would he have any difficulties? Are there any areas that we're going to be particularly nervous about? And how would his knowledge of the system and his ability to self-advocate play a role here, right? How would his energy level in the particular day play a role? How is how much he ate last night going to play a role? So let's take 5 minutes or so, talk amongst yourselves, and then one of you is coming with me. Okay. Oh my gosh, I love this. Okay, clap if you can hear me. Ah! It's funny. Now you can all hear me. No, she was joking. She's like, that's a kindergarten class thing. Don't do that, Sophia. I did it. I'm sorry. Okay, this is amazing. It sounded like we were having some really great in-depth conversations, and my hope is that we're going to build on those. So those conversations are going to continue as a thread through those steps. So Emmerich went to Ontario Works. He's going to have to talk to someone. Do I have a volunteer who would like to come up and have that conversation with me? I think yes, striped shirt. Okay. Oh, we have a willing volunteer. Okay. Woo! Give it up for the willing volunteer. Okay, can you take a seat right there? So we're both going to need to share the mic. Okay. Test, test. We're good? Okay. You might need to lean forward for translation when it's your turn. All right. And we are ready to go. Okay, hi. Can I get your name?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Sarah Taylor. Hi.
And today you're Emmerich. Hi, Emmerich.
I thought I was the caseworker.
No, I am. You're Emmerich.
Got it.
Can but we would have to lean. Maybe she gets mic and I get handheld. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's okay. Boy, I hope not. Test. Amazing. We both have a mic. Okay. Well, welcome to Ontario Works. Let's go through a quick assessment, if you don't mind. Are you currently working?
Yes.
What kind of employment situation?
I do some under the table work for a construction company.
Okay. Are you receiving T4s, anything like that?
No.
Okay. So no. Do you have any children?
Yes, I have one.
And how old?
12.
Okay. All right. And are you 12 not paying for childcare, no major daycare expenses?
No, he stays home with his grandmother.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay. And is there, you mentioned he stays with a grandmother, so do you have a partner? Is mom involved at all?
No, I don't have a partner.
Okay. So are they paying, I presume there's an X, are they paying child support? Are you receiving spousal support at all?
No, we have no contact.
Okay. So if that changes, we'll need to report that, okay? Do you have any major personal assets? Is there a vehicle, property?
No.
No, not really. Okay. And where are you currently living?
We have a unit, but my landlord just told us that he'll be remodeling and we have to leave.
Okay.
And then I can't afford it after.
Okay. So you do need proof of address to apply. So if you're not continuously staying in that place, the best way to go about it is usually to establish it in an emergency shelter. So we'd need to get that paperwork drawn up for you. Do you have, I actually have a list for you. Do you have your SIN number, health card, birth certificate, bank statement, proof of address, and recent pay stubs for yourself and all members of your household?
No.
Not on you?
I have some things.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're going to need them all before we can apply. Now, you mentioned you have a mother in the household. Are you applying as a family?
Can I?
You can, but I would recommend that you don't.
Okay.
So if your mother applies as a single person, then she would be evaluated for her own personal needs allowance. When you claim an elderly parent as a dependent, you need to demonstrate evidence that you're actually paying for them as though they are your dependent. So that would mean going back and seeking maybe bills you've been paying for her, maybe receipts proving that there's this extra burden on your household before we'd be able to get that request in. So this does take some time. And if she begins making any money, like if she has a pension kick in, that would be cut out of your allowance. So I do recommend that she comes back on her own. That said, do you think she's up to date on her taxes?
No, I know we're not.
Okay, so she does need to apply for old age security before she's eligible to apply, which means she needs to be up to date on her taxes. So if she has many backed years, I would really recommend that she go talk to an accountant.
Is an accountant. I don't feel like we can afford to pay for an accountant. So is there someone that can help us with that?
Well, we can start getting your file going. Once it kicks in, it does kick in pretty quickly. So let's see what we're looking at here, okay? So if you are approved, you would be eligible, you and your sons, so single plus one dependent, for $1,135 a month.
Okay.
But that is only if you're paying rent. So if you are losing access to your current housing, I can approve $493 a month.
And does it impact that I have an income? How does that work?
So you would need to bring us all of your bank statements, and if you are over the allotted amount, we are going to claw back 50 to 75%, depending on your circumstances. If you're continuously making over a certain threshold, we're going to cut you off. And we do need to look at your bank statements as well, so you can't be working under the table. That said, you do need to prove that you're attempting to work to stay on the program. So we need you to be in employment training, education, or show proof that you're actively attending interviews. I do need to be clear that gig work does not count towards this. So any kind of under-the-table cash payments, I need to see records of employment. So please do be sure that you can do that. We give you a grace period, but we would have to talk about extending that if I'm not seeing evidence that you're working, okay?
Okay, so what would the time involvement be with working with employment?
I believe I can give you 3 months.
Okay, before I have to work with employment?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Okay.
So I need all of your financial documents. I need all of your recent bank statements. And I can get this processing once you're back with proof of identity, proof of income, proof of housing status, proof of assets, including your last notice of assessments. You really do need to see an accountant. And your bank statement, and your proof of work and education status, and all of your debts owned for you and your son.
Debts too. Okay, do you have a list of all this?
I'll give you a handout. And scene. Round of applause for our volunteer. Not great, huh? Not great at all. So a big part of my job is to lurk around on government agencies' websites looking at their intake forms to ensure that that's as close to accurate as possible. And what's really interesting too is there are circumstances where we've sat down with our team of lived experts and they tell us these stories where you can see what's happening. There was one in particular, we're not running that profile today, we're going to be doing it next week at a different conference, but it was a profile that was written by a member of our team who has lived experience of homelessness in a settlement as a refugee. And told this story of being mandated to attend ESL classes to remain eligible for social assistance. English is her first language. She just has an accent. So by the book, right, that would likely be something where an exemption could have been made. There would have been a moment where you could probably say, they actually super speak English in Nigeria, I'm not doing that, right? But if you are someone who is that vulnerable, back to that self-advocacy discussion from before, right? If you are that vulnerable and someone says you can't feed your babies unless you go to an ESL class every week, you're going to relearn English. Okay. Okay, so I gave Amric a lot of next steps. I don't think any of us could even imagine what the first one would be. I don't think I can. Give you a lot of next steps. Head's completely spinning. Even with the housing allowance, remember that was about $1,400 for you and a child, and realistically your mother, while we wait for her taxes to get taken care of. That's nothing. That will never be enough for you to afford a home. You're going to need a lot more money. But there are subsidies, right? There are wait lists. Maybe that will bridge the difference and make it so that you can survive in Ontario Works. So we're going to head to housing services to see if we can find a place to live that you are able to afford right now without changing anything to do with your work situation and your social assistance situation. You want a one-bedroom apartment for up to $1,050 a month. Now, we all know in this room, that's still absurd, right? That would be such a share of his income that there is no way his child could possibly be nourished. There is no way the lights could possibly be on, but he'll do it. He is showing us that he will do it. That's still his preference. Rather than stay muddied in all of this, he'll do it. He's willing to be added to any of the wait lists. He'll go anywhere, he'll take anything, but he needs to go now. He's not going to keep going back to a shelter. He's not going to let his son grow up in situations that are unideal for them. So we're going to take a break again. I want you to discuss roughly what he might be bringing into this experience based on that one, based on the one that we just had. What has he learned from his previous interactions with the system? How are systematic barriers starting to come in, right? And what would ideal even look like here? Like, let's dream big and better. What do we actually want for Amaruk and his family? And what impact would that have on their well-being, with the acknowledgement that, like, there's an elder in this household, there's a child in this household, this is a family. What difference would that make for them? So take a few minutes, have a conversation. Test, test, test. There we go. I'm cutting you off a little earlier because I was worried we wouldn't be able to fill time, but we're over time. Okay, so we are heading to get on the housing wait list. So at this point, landlord has booted you out. You are not in housing. You do not have a place to sleep tonight. You are going to housing services. You are going to try to get on the wait list. Do I have a volunteer? Oh, sure, come on. Yay. Woo, give it up for authentic volunteer. Not a plant. Katie. Okay, have a seat. You can take this mic right here.
Hello.
Perfect. All right. Let's get you all set up. Okay, can I get your name?
Amarak.
Perfect. It's very nice to meet you. I'm Sophia. Welcome to the housing office. What's going on in your world? What do you need?
We just lost our home.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, so you're seeking to get on the wait list for new housing then. Okay, so we can absolutely do that, and that is absolutely what we do here. I do need to warn you that the social housing registry is 13,000 households long. So you will be waiting 5 to 10 years, but folks who are on the outskirts of eligibility are waiting 14, 15 right now. I realize that's not ideal. But our city has a centralized system, and I can't offer you an alternative. So what I often recommend is that we go ahead and get your profile set up anyways. There's always a chance you'll apply for some kind of priority. Is that okay?
What are the priorities?
So there's a couple. I think the fastest way to get placed is if you are already receiving some kind of subsidy, but you are underhoused or overhoused, particularly overhoused. So that's, have you had a child leave for university lately? You have too much housing and you need a smaller place?
We're in a shelter.
Okay, so no. There is a health pathway, but you would need a doctor to say that that your housing is directly causing a life-threatening condition. So that would be something like they've discovered asbestos and it's crumbling. Is that an active part of this?
I live with my grandmother. She's sick.
Okay. And now is there an active threat in the shelter setting, something like exposed wires that could...
We just got there. I don't know.
Okay. So generally speaking, shelters are subject to inspections, so that's unlikely to count towards hazardous housing. Now there is a priority for homelessness. So why don't we start your application? It sounds like that might work. Is that okay? The remaining ones are human trafficking and domestic violence, but you'd need a professional to write a letter testifying that you're not lying, and I don't think that that's part of your... Okay. All right. So let's go over the eligibility requirements. So every member of your household is a citizen, landed immigrant, refugee, or refugee claimant. Any of the above?
We were all born here.
Okay, so you're all Canadian citizens. Do you owe money to any social housing provider?
No.
Okay. You aren't under a deportation order?
No.
Okay. You've never been convicted of fraud related to rent-to-income assistance or misrepresented your income to us in the past?
No.
Okay. Can every member of your household bring us documentation on their proof of citizenship and proof of income?
I don't know.
Okay. So we'll give you a list of forms, okay? So you mentioned that you're homeless. That is a priority status, and we can get you into a unit more rapidly. Unfortunately, time-limited gaps in housing don't count. So you have to prove that you're chronically homeless before we consider this. You said you just got to the shelter?
Yes.
Okay. So often what happens is you'll need to spend a period of time waiting for an appointment with your caseworker who can write a letter to testify that you're chronically homeless, which you can bring back to us to file, which may reduce your wait.
Who's my caseworker?
I can't help you with that. I'm sorry.
From where?
The shelter.
From the shelter.
So you'll have to go back and explain this to them. We can give you a boilerplate form to take to them, but establishing residency there will really help. So if you can get your mail sent to the shelter, stick around for a little bit, that's probably your best bet. And again, we need that before we can file this application.
How long?
Usually a couple months, maybe a few weeks. And then we file and then you wait for the housing, okay?
Okay.
Okay. So if you don't want to stay in the shelter and you don't want to wait for the list, we'd have to look at a market rental. Do you know roughly what your budget is?
I went to Ontario Works.
Mm-hmm.
They said, I forget the amount, like.
Yeah, probably
if
like
we-
$1,000 or
Yeah,
something. Yeah.
1,000 and a little bit more.
Okay.
But only if we.
Only
I
if you're
wasn't sure.
paying
I
rent, eh?
wasn't sure on.
Yeah.
They said a lot.
Often what they'll tell you is that you can have $400 if you're not paying rent and then $1,400 if you are. But you're only allowed to spend 30% of that on the housing itself. The rest is for bills. So that's unlikely to work. So the average one-bedroom apartment in the city of Ottawa right now is about $2,200 a month plus utilities. Now, you do have a child in the home, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So one-bedrooms are out for you entirely. Unfortunately, that is a child welfare issue. We don't want to be setting you up for overcrowding. That could really put you at risk. Now, you could look for a market unit and apply for the Canada-Ontario Housing Benefit. That's a portable housing benefit, so you can bring it with you, and it'll pay a percentage. Now, the percentage calculated is based on your last year's notice of assessment. Are you up to date on your taxes?
I've never done.
Okay, so
I've
you're
never.
going to need those caught up before we can apply. I'm very sorry. Unfortunately, Emmerich, I can't actually process anything today. I need you to come back when your documents are in order.
Do you know, where can I go for taxes? They said an accountant, but I don't know.
Right.
Is there someone who can help?
There are community tax clinics in the month of April. So it's October now. So if you can hunker down, sorry, I shouldn't laugh, that we can certainly, I mean, there's a bulletin board in the lobby. There might be some community resources you could follow up with. I'm very sorry, but we don't do emergency housing. You'll have to go back to the shelter.
Where do I go next? Who do I talk to?
Go back to the shelter. Ask the staff. I'm very sorry. Best of luck, Emmerich.
Thank you.
Give it up for our volunteer. Not great, you guys. That was great, but the situation is not great. So America's really struggling, right? It's just kind of no at every possible step. And a big part of those no's are like administrative taxes tasks that many of us completely take for granted, right? Like if you're slightly behind on your taxes, you don't want to know how often I've been slightly behind on my taxes, let me tell you. But for someone in his position, that becomes life or death really, really, really quickly. And when you are setting people that far back of needing to do that much work before they can even get on the wait list to get on the wait list to get on the wait list, you start to see how people get too burnt out to engage with the system at all, right? Where it's just like, no, fuck that. I'd rather, just kind of sit and I'll wait for my son to grow up and we'll tackle this later. Oops, didn't click through that. All right, so you got more paperwork, you got more steps, and you're really disappointed because remember, this is like you went to the land of opportunity, right? You were sold this big story about this being the tool that you needed to protect your mom and protect your kid, and it's been completely the opposite. You do go back to the shelter. You're talking a little bit about your experience. Somebody goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. Have you heard about the Residential Tenancies Act? That's not legal. They recommend that you submit a claim to the Landlord Tenant Board. So in the province of Ontario, that's where you go if there is a dispute with your landlord. You're going to go there. You're going to let them know that you were evicted without notice. You knew there was a rent eviction coming, but then all of a sudden your lock is changed. It was very, very sudden. There's no communication coming. You never damaged any property, you never harassed anyone, you never caused trouble in any way whatsoever. You are a good tenant, you paid your rent on time, you mind your own business. You asked your landlord to give you more time before starting renovations so that you could find somewhere else to live, and that was the last point of communication. You have no idea what's going on. You've just been shuffled around since then. So take 2 minutes. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. We're going over. Take a couple minutes, talk about where the power imbalances are showing up, right? It's pretty continuous where we're seeing these discrepancies. How might bias or assumptions impact Amarek's experiences, past, present, and future? Critically, because the LTB has the word board in it. If you have to present a certain way to people, where's that going to come in, right? And what would a rights-based approach to landlord-tenant conflict actually look like? What's our best case scenario for this next step? Take a minute, talk fast. Okay, it is I, the buzzkill, I'm sorry. We are breaking up the conversation already. I'm so sorry. I don't want to do it because it sounds so good and so rich. And please feel free to loiter after and continue talking about themes. We'll do a little bit of a debrief conversation in a sec. But let's go ahead and move forward to what happens next at the landlord-tenant board. Do we have a volunteer to come to the LTB? You'll do it? Okay. No, yeah, okay, there we go.
Okay, so you're in that mic.
Okay, so this one, there is usually not actually even a person at the LTB that you would talk to at this stage. It's very hard to get information, but for the purposes of the simulation, let's pretend. Hi, who are you?
I'm a rook.
Okay, it's very nice to meet you. Do you have a landlord complaint that you'd like to talk about today?
I'm not sure. I lost my apartment.
Oh dear, okay, so what kind of housing was it? Was it a condo, full house, or an apartment rental?
It's an apartment.
An
a
apartment?
regular one.
Okay, so that's within our scope. And it wasn't a social housing unit, right? You were paying rent directly to a landlord?
Yes, we were paying rent.
Okay, so that does qualify. So what were the circumstances there? What seems to be the issue?
I came home one day and all my stuff was outside, and my mother and child, we could not get into our home.
Oh, okay. So were you given at least 10 days notice prior to eviction?
No, we had no idea what happened. The locks were changed. We couldn't go inside.
Oh, I'm very sorry to hear that. I can see in my system, it seems like your landlord filed an N7. So that is a notice to evict for disruptions. What did you do?
We didn't do anything. And what's an N7?
So you would see that usually if someone is threatening people in the building, breaking things. Nothing really? Nothing like that?
I live with my elderly parent and a young child. We stick to ourselves. We don't disturb anyone.
Okay, so that is what was filed. I believe you. It does sound like this might not have been filed in good faith. I would strongly recommend that you file a T5 form. So that's a notice of termination in bad faith. You use it in these situations where someone has lied about your behavior. You can't do that online. So we're going to have to find access to a printer, get it printed out, fill it out, and then send it by mail to the LTB offices, okay? But you can file it. Unfortunately, there is a significant backlog at the LTB. My hope is that this would be seen as a priority because this does seem very clear-cut as a retaliatory response from your landlord, but that would shorten your wait for a hearing from 6 to 12 months to 3 to 4 months, and you're still another 12 months until the average resolution time. You can get a payout, and I would recommend you do that, but this is not a solution for the next year of your housing. I'm very sorry. This is not going to be a quick response. Now, you can seek legal counsel. You can get an attorney to consult on this. And in the meantime, collect everything. Do you have text messages from your landlord, records, anything like that?
We always just spoke to each other and had a good relationship. No.
That's going to be difficult. You might want to track down some maybe former neighbors who can testify on your behalf. But unfortunately, we can't provide any assistance with that process. You would need to go to legal aid. But go online, Google T5, you can print it out and send it in, and we'll be in touch in 3 to 12 months.
What's the T5 again? I didn't understand half of what you said.
That happens. Notice of termination in bad faith. So we will take your word that this was in bad faith, that he was retaliating against you or they were retaliating against you. But again, we cannot first hear that claim for up to 12 months from your filing. So please do get the filing going, and then you have a year to get legal advice and collect documentation.
So in 12 months, you'll hear my testimony.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a legal procedure.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I get what?
So if
I
your
could go
landlord
back
is
to that apartment with a hostile landlord?
That is often what is suggested is that they pay you 3 months of rent or you get to move back into the apartment and they can't change it. If he's found at fault, he may owe you significant money. It's something in the ballpark of $10,000. I will warn you that most tenant filed complaints do not go through to that stage. It's unlikely.
How many go through?
It's a great question. Does anybody know off the top of your head? I've forgotten. I think it's like 4 times less successful than landlord filed.
Do I have any chance in hell of getting that $10,000?
No.
So why would I do that?
So you can feel like there's a chance.
I need more than hope right now to survive.
I recommend that you go back and speak to your shelter caseworker. I'm very sorry, Emmerich. There's nothing else we can do here.
That was useless.
Thank you. Give it up. Okay, so he's not having a great time. He's really not. So if you continue to follow this through in a real simulation, you would get to the final kind of QR code that you scan, and it tells you where we leave off the story. For Emmerich, the participants would see this slide. They would see that no one working full-time at minimum wage can possibly afford to rent a unit and have enough money left over for food. His work pays a lot less than minimum wage. He's going to need help, but the paperwork and administrative barriers to all of the kinds of help that we explored today are literally limitless. He can't fathom going back to a shelter. He knows that waiting for social housing is going to take years, possibly decades. And he knows that there is absolutely no guarantee he would win that argument against the LTB. And even if he does, $10,000 when you're deep in debt and poverty is gone in a second. There is no guarantee. Whoopsie daisy. So his options right now are to work more jobs. He can work 2-3 jobs. He can surrender all of his savings, all of his income. Everything can go to housing, and he will just figure out feeding his family later. He does think about just packing up and going back home, but that also costs money, and that's gone now. He doesn't have the opportunity to go back home. We heard from some hospice workers in Ottawa that they often have folks who at the end of their lives have to choose between going back home or having their body sent back, or family being allowed to be with them. You get one flight. The government will pay for one flight. You choose when in your lifetime it happens. He came here for a reason, reasons about healthcare, reasons about opportunity for his son, work, education, his mother's well-being. None of that has been addressed. He's in waiting rooms all day. He's filling out forms all day. There aren't any good options left. So earlier when I said you can't gamify this, there's no way to win, there's no way to win. He's going to continue on his life, and it's going to be complicated, and good things will happen and bad things will happen. But what the participants and what you, I hope, are taking away from this is that the system around his life experience is deeply broken. And with that, I'm going to give it to Katie to say debrief words.
First of all, thank you to the volunteers. Huge thank you, because just taking it seriously is also one of the things that we really have to coach a lot of groups on, in that it's not about gamifying, it's not about acting, but it's really just trying to have the position of being a learner. So thank you so much. Really thoughtful and really powerful, I felt, watching you. I'm curious, who maybe learned something new, or was there anything that surprised you? You can just put up your hand. You don't have to say what it was, or you can. But was there anything new for people? You? Yeah? You're all experts. You know this system. You work in this system all the time, which I think is always interesting when we do this with service providers, because they're like, I hadn't seen it all together necessarily. Like, I know pieces of this and I know these things to be true, but I hadn't seen the trajectory of when that person's sitting in front of me, they've gone through 4 other appointments in the last week that have all been brutal. And not because the caseworker is not kind or not wanting to help, but there's no help. The things that they have to jump over are so difficult. So a lot of what we do in the debrief is unpacking, what did you learn? How did you experience that? What did you feel? And then we really want to move into action. And so does anybody want to shout out any, I must say this about the experience? Is there any kind of really strong, just need to get this off my chest, or say anything? Yeah.
Thank you. That was really great. What I loved is how you were very direct, but not unkind. And I feel like that's a key part, because it would be really easy to sort of present all of the caseworkers in these scenarios as individual villains or just like, a bad worker or someone who's like having a bad day. And I feel like that would kind of make all the participants miss the point, is that like, these are people who are in these systems who are trying to support people to navigate it, but are also like working through this like paperwork and bureaucracy that is like actually set up to make people continuously fail. And so, yeah, I just feel like in thinking about how I could apply this, like that is a key piece for whoever's facilitating this, is that like, not to be, actually to be like quite friendly and kind, but like just not vilify that individual.
That's so bang on. Yeah, that's so bang on. And actually the volunteers who work as the caseworkers, we debrief them because there is that feeling of helplessness on their end. And they're like, holy shit, like, why does it feel like this? I'm trying to help. And we actually have a number of volunteers that they're so kind and empathetic, and the way they're trying to approach it is just kind, and they feel so helpless. And I'm sure anybody who does frontline or has done it, it's so often how we feel trying to push. And yet, like, oh my gosh, frontline, creative ways of getting resources for the people that we're trying to support. So, yeah.
It's and I just wanted to touch on that because that's a common trapping, right? Is when you tell stories of system failures, it becomes stories of individual workers. And workers do not get into this because we want to punish homeless people. Like, of course, that's far from the case. So if you are a volunteer at the Empathy Project, when you sit down at your table, page 1 of kind of the scripted manual in front of you says, you are you on your first day at a new job. This is you trying your best to work within the policy framework available to you. And when I play those roles, I'm often saying things that I said when I was a frontline worker. Like, these are systems that I'm sure most of us have worked within to some degree. And this is a story of the system kind of victimizing in multiple different ways. And part of that is in the heartache that the service provider is feeling.
So for the debrief, I just want to highlight 2 pieces. One, in the social housing registry simulation, in order for Amaruk to get housing, he had to escalate risk, basically, right? It's like, if your situation is really, really bad, we can highlight and prioritize you. And that's something that we really try and help people understand about the system, is like, we've created it so that you must escalate your level of risk in order to get resources. And that's strategic. It's not manipulative. It is very strategic. People make the best choice they can in the context they're in. And I always share this story of, I was doing a focus group with a number of young women, and they all said, the only way I can get housing is if I get pregnant. And like, to me, that's like the exact idea that that's how we've designed things. And so that's one piece. And the other piece I really want to highlight that a lot of people say when they do this is, I don't believe this. This isn't actually how it has. There's a lot of resistance, especially from people who have no interaction with the system. And we've seen people have like very angry reactions, and just be like, there's no possible way this could have happened. And that's why this being developed and written by people with lived experience is so critical, because there's policy and then there's reality. And we do have a lot of policies that say this is how it's supposed to work, and actual experiences are often very different. So we really try and lean into that in terms of like, how are we designing systems? Maybe the policy's kind of okay, it's usually not, but maybe it is, but that's not the reality of what the person's experiencing. So what's the impact of this? And you can go to the next one. So we've now been, hired to be part of the Ottawa U medical students curriculum. First year medical students do this exercise every semester. We've done this for a number of years now on the evaluations, and we've actually been published in a medical journal. Basically, of like 255 people, people thought it was either very important to their future career or really important, or important, not really and very. And I think just generally, people really starting to unpack this as like the social determinants of health. So expanding their understanding that it's more than the interaction I'm having with a patient trying to prescribe medication. It's actually understanding that maybe this person doesn't eat enough food to even be able to take that medication. Next slide. So the goal of this is to move things. It is to make change. It is to engage strategic stakeholders. So the medical students, we want to create a pipeline of healthcare workers who understand this. They need to understand what homelessness is like, housing precarity, security of tenure. All those things are so important to providing good healthcare for people, good support for people. We want to leverage that learning, and we really try and end with, here's the solution. Here's a thing you can do, specific group, target audience, that will make a difference in this system that you are a part of. And also a sense of like, it's not hopeless. We all have the opportunity for influence, and we really try and leverage it in that way. Next slide. So I just want to give you some examples. My most recent favorite one was med schools have expanded to now doing lawyers, occupational therapy, nursing, and pharmacy did the last one. And the teacher for the occupational therapy class who did it, she said the Monday after the project, she gave a case study to try and walk through what would you do sort of thing. And the first question multiple students asked were, well, can this person even afford a toothbrush? Like, do they even have the money to like implement the advice I'm giving them? And that's the point. That person is now an active agent in understanding the barriers somebody is dealing with and now has to creatively work with, okay, how can we solve this part of it so that we can help this person? The other piece, nope, go back, sorry. I also want to talk about St. John, which back in the day, I'd done this across Canada in a few provinces. We called it barrier busting. And what was amazing is we did it with the whole community. It was like a full day experience. And it was members of city council, service providers, like really people who were pretty embedded in this world. And at the end of the session, they called a meeting, the mayor was there, and they called a meeting to figure out their winter shelter strategy. And this was like 2018, I think. Can't even remember. It was actually my birthday. So the mayor, it was like a really good birthday because this is how it ended. So at the table, you could see all these people had just done this exercise and they were like, how do we build a new emergency shelter for the winter? And somebody spoke up and they were like, what if we housed people? But it was like, not meek, but it was like a timid, like, is there another way? And it came from this exercise. Like it came from having to navigate it and getting a sense that like we don't have to accept the shitty version of this. I shouldn't swear, it's on video. But we don't have to accept what we think is the solution. And that winter, they didn't open another shelter. They had a housing blitz. They got private landlords involved and they housed everybody and there was no winter shelter opened. And I think that's because of this. And also, people were motivated, but then they did the work. They became active agents in solving that challenge. We did it in Newfoundland too, which was very cool. Minister of Justice was there, and he called up the Doug Pawson. He's the executive director of End Homelessness St. John's. Called him up the next day and was like, Doug, there are so many things we can do that are not legislation, but that are fixable. Let's get to work. Next slide. School boards, this was our pitch. We wanted to get the upstream project and family and natural supports and really good solutions that are starting to happen in our community. So we went to the Catholic board. It was like, we think you should do this. We brought service providers who do youth homelessness work specifically, did the debrief with them. And you can see the board staff being like, if we had intervened at this stage in this young person's life, that entire trajectory would have been different. And they were starting to make the connections and they're like, well, we have an intervention for you. And then proceeded to pitch what was sort of already happening, but we were like, we got to solidify the buy-in. And that's what the point of this is. And so now we're actively working on implementing those programs, which is really exciting. And what we're up to next, actually, we've done service providers. Service providers are always interesting because I'm like, all of you here, like, we know this system. And it's just interesting to be like, oh, okay, I didn't see the full story, and that actually matters to being able to understand that full picture. But board members are really key. There are tons of frontline workers and tons of senior staff and executive directors who want to do new things in their organization. If your board does not understand that there's a bigger system and that it's not all about just one agency, but it's an entire community rowing together to end homelessness, you're not going to be able to be an active participant as an agency. If your board is saying, we just need to go this way, this is what we're going to do, there is a huge culture change piece that we really specifically want to engage boards in this exercise for that purpose. We've done it a few times of inviting them, but we have one coming up that's all of the emergency shelter boards. In Ottawa, we're starting to see really good results with diversion, but we need the other shelter boards on board. We have one or two shelter champions who are like, we can do this, but it's the other boards that we need their leadership to really move that work forward. And then, I think those are the kind of key ones. And I guess we have a few minutes left, but just want to open it up to the floor. Who do you need to change? Like, who in your community are you like, we need their buy-in or it's not going to work? Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, so aside from workshops, how can we champion an ongoing culture of empathy within our practice, within our organizations?
So that's a great question. I don't feel like I have a great answer, but I mean, everything starts with leadership. Everything starts with leadership. Where's your ED at? Where's your board at? I think when you can get boards building muscle in empathy, because empathy is a muscle, it's possible for all of us to build on it and learn and work it out. And the more we do it, the better we are. So I think that starting from that place, I think having lived experience leadership is so key. And there's different ways to do that in different communities. But thinking of, the private sector where you do user testing, we'd never release a product unless you've had people test it out. And I think there's something to that of having people be able to help you understand, this program works for this program doesn't work for this. I think those pieces are really key, but I really think a lot of it comes from leadership and continuing to just lead with lived experience leadership, as well as helping people understand that big picture. So we're obviously going to shamelessly be do the empathy project. But I think it's becoming a training for a number of agencies. And I think could you make something or a smaller version of this as a training? And that just becomes part of, you do your nonviolent crisis intervention, you do your empathy project day. I think that's something that we're starting to see the impact of people referring to it at this point years later and being that crystallized it for me. So for new staff, I think that is actually something we're starting to see that agencies are asking us to come in and do it as a training. So I'm not sure that fully answered, but hopefully enough. Do other folks have either questions or just people that you're we need to engage X politician, or what audiences are you trying to convince? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in heels. I'm slow.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, if you're a legacy claimant and you're in this specific situation, what resources at your disposal would you have to sort of alleviate the stress and the precariousness of what he's going through? Yeah. So if you're a refugee or someone who just newly arrived from a different country, and you go through the court process, but there hasn't been a judgment passed on your citizenship status, what are the options available to this person in this situation?
Thank you. We do have a profile that's specifically a newcomer who's having to navigate the refugee settlement system and have those decisions made. So again, sadly, it ends with there's not really good solutions and there's not really housing while that process plays out. It's different in every province, but.
Yeah, I asked that question at a working group in our city where folks work with refugees and refugee claimants. And when I asked that, they said, well, technically speaking, there's nothing for refugee claimants. Technically speaking, that's just kind of you're in the waiting room. What we see are some individual agencies that make compassionate exemptions. The City of Ottawa recently got a reimbursement payment for money that was allocated towards cases that just weren't funded anywhere by anyone for anything. So they really are in limbo while they're waiting for those court proceedings, which we do explore in one of our 8 pathways.
Any other, yeah. Sorry.
Hi, I was just wondering if you think it would ever be possible to do trainings with the welfare office or with the rental board, or is that just too out there?
We're in active talks with actually doing this with social assistance workers. I have to say, I have done it with a few sprinkled in. I think there's vicarious trauma for someone who's doing that work. And the caseloads are like 145 people. And there is like deep defensiveness in the debrief, which I 100% get why that happens. So I think part of our intention in the debrief is to like really approach it with non-judgment. Like we are all in a terrible system and it's harmful to the people in it. It's harmful to the workers in it. And so I think we try to approach it with like compassion of just, this is rough, but it does bring up defensiveness. But we do have an ongoing conversation with social assistants right now in doing it. So yeah.
Well, why don't maybe we'll have folks that want to stay for more questions stay, because I see some people getting a little bit wiggly. But before we do, I just want to show you guys that we have taken this all over the place. And what you're looking at here isn't from sector professionals. These are like students and bureaucrats and folks who are totally unusual suspects saying things like, you know, this was the first time I truly felt supported during the simulation was when I saw another person with lived experience. That's a big learning for someone that has not engaged with our system, where we're seeing, you know, folks saying the systematic nature of the problem left me feeling as though a more coordinated approach by all parties is you don't say. So we are really consistently seeing that this is the moment that makes people get it. If any of you still have that QR code from earlier open in your devices, there is an evaluation there. Would love to hear your thoughts. If you have any notes on the project, it gets better every time. So what I'm going to do is skip one ahead. What I've done is I have done a QR code that is going to open an email to me. It's pre-populated. You don't need to fill anything else in. If you stamp your name on it and just kind of, I need more information about this project, I'll email you after the conference. I figure this is easier than you fiddling with cards. Just scan it, send it. I'll deal with it later. We'll be in touch. And please do linger if you have a question. I do see a few like hands still being jumpy, but just in recognition that people might need bio breaks and things of that nature. We thank you so, so much for your time.